At 0900 hours, under a white-hot sun hanging over the Gulf of Aden, the ocean looked deceptively calm. A flat, endless expanse of blue stretched to every horizon, broken only by the distant silhouette of grey steel cutting through the water with quiet authority. The USS Gonzales moved with the steady confidence of a warship built for dominance, her radar sweeping the surface, her crew deep into what should have been just another routine patrol. Then the contact appeared. At first, it was nothing more than a blip, a small return on radar, barely distinguishable from the clutter of fishing traffic that filled these waters every day. But within seconds, the shape resolved into something more deliberate. A large diesel-powered skiff, pushing hard through open water at 15 knots, towing two smaller gasoline attack boats behind it like predators in formation. On the bridge, eyes narrowed. This wasn't normal. Fishing vessels didn't tow high-speed boats like trailers. Not out here. Not like this. Still, suspicion alone wasn't enough. The Gulf of Aden was a place where strange configurations were common. Fishermen improvised. Smugglers adapted. And sometimes, something that looked wrong was simply wrong-looking. Protocol demanded caution. You didn't escalate without cause. Not here. Not in one of the busiest maritime corridors on Earth. You couldn't afford to treat every unknown contact as hostile. Do that, and you wouldn't just waste ammunition, you'd spark an international incident before the day was over. So the officer of the deck made the call. From the deck of the Gonzales, a rigid-hull inflatable boat, small, fast, and lightly armed, splashed into the water. 5 sailors climbed aboard, rifles slung, faces calm with the practiced confidence of repetition. Boarding teams ran operations like this constantly, dozens of times a month. Intercept, inspect, verify, move on. Routine. The kind of routine that lulls you into believing nothing will go wrong. The RIB accelerated away from the destroyer, its outboard engine whining as it cut across the water toward the approaching contact. Behind them, the Gonzales maintained course, tracking the skiff with quiet precision. 2,000 yards of open ocean separated them now. A manageable distance. A short approach. Just another job. But high above, already circling long before the radar contact had even registered, an MH-60 Seahawk helicopter was watching. Its sensors didn't rely on assumptions. The operator inside the aircraft slewed the FLIR turret toward the skiff, zooming in through shimmering heat distortions. What appeared on the thermal display erased any doubt in an instant. Not nets. Not cargo. Weapons. RPG launchers leaned casually against the gunwale, their warheads glowing faintly warmer than the fiberglass hull. Kalashnikov rifles rested across laps. Men sat forward, focused not on fishing lines, but on magazines they were loading with deliberate, practiced movements. 12 individuals, armed, organized, prepared. The operator zoomed tighter, capturing every detail. Radar could never reveal the way the men were positioned, the readiness of the weapons, the tow lines rigged for instant release. One cut, and those smaller boats would break free, maneuvering independently. One skiff was an intercept. 3 attack boats were an ambush. The report hit the Combat Information Center like a shock wave. This wasn't a suspect contact anymore. This was a confirmed hostile force. And they were closing. Fast. 1,800 yards. On the bridge, the order came down immediately. RIB, come about. Return to ship, now. The coxswain acknowledged, spun the wheel hard over, and the engine died. A sputter, a choke, silence, salt water, contamination, vapor lock, it didn't matter. In the corrosive brutality of the open ocean, mechanical failure was a constant companion. Every boarding team had a story about getting stranded mid-patrol. Usually, it was an inconvenience. Today, it was a death sentence waiting to happen. The coxswain tried again. Starter grinding. Nothing. Again. Nothing. 5 American sailors were now drifting, dead in the water, directly between two warships and a rapidly approaching hostile force armed with RPGs. The math was merciless. At 15 knots, the skiff was devouring distance 100 feet every 4 seconds. 1,500 yards. And then the situation got worse. The mothership altered course, not away, but toward the warships. At the same moment, the tow lines snapped free. The two smaller attack boats roared to life, engines screaming as they peeled off in opposite directions. One angled toward the Gonzalez's port quarter, the other swung wide, arcing toward the Cape Street. George. One contact became 3. A classic swarm. Inside CIC, voices rose in controlled urgency as bearings shifted, contacts separated, and the tactical picture exploded into complexity. The pirates were executing textbook maneuvering, splitting angles, dividing attention, overwhelming response. It was a tactic that worked against merchant ships. But this wasn't a merchant ship. This was 2 of the most heavily armed warships on Earth. And yet, there was a problem. 1,000 yards. The RIB sat motionless in the worst possible place, right in the center of it all. No armor, no cover. Just 5 men in a rubber hull, surrounded by open ocean and closing threats. The warships couldn't fire, not without risking their own. Every solution required the RIB to move, and it couldn't. 800 yards. Overhead, the Seahawk crew watched as pirates shifted into firing positions. RPGs came up. Rifles braced. This wasn't posturing anymore. This was seconds from violence. On the Gonzalez, options evaporated with every heartbeat. The helicopter couldn't engage. It wasn't configured for it. The Cape Street George maneuvered, searching for a firing angle, but the geometry was broken. Every line of fire intersected the same problem. 600 yards. The pirates saw the stranded RIB, and they accelerated. What happened next revealed something no wargame had ever accounted for. Every primary weapon system on both ships was useless. The Mark 45 naval gun couldn't depress low enough to engage at this range. It was built for targets miles away. The vertical launch systems loaded with missiles worth millions required distance to arm. Fire one now, and it would overshoot entirely. Even the CIWS, the last line of defense against supersonic missiles, had no solution for small boats this close. $1 billion of cutting-edge naval warfare technology had been reduced to irrelevance. The only weapons that mattered now were mounted machine guns and rifles. And even those came with a problem. 2 warships, 1 engagement zone, 1 friendly unit trapped in the middle. There was no system for this. No automation. No algorithm. Just human voices over a radio, carving firing lanes out of chaos in real time. The Gonzalez takes this sector. Cape Street George takes that. Nobody fires into the RIB's quadrant. But the RIB wasn't stationary. It drifted with the current, shifting unpredictably, turning safe zones into moving targets. The margin for error was razor thin. Then came the decision. There was no time for legal review. No time for debate. 12 armed men, ignoring warnings, closing aggressively on a disabled American boarding team. Hostile intent was undeniable. The order came down. Engage. On the decks, 50 caliber gunners stepped forward into the open air, exposed, vulnerable, staring directly at men holding RPGs. At 200 yards, there was no precision aiming, only instinct. The guns opened up. The sound wasn't sharp. It was a deep, concussive hammering that reverberated through bone and steel alike. Streams of fire tore across the water, converging on the mothership from 2 directions. Heavy rounds punched through fiberglass hulls like paper, shredding structure, ripping engines apart, turning cover into illusion. The pirates returned fire. Rounds snapped through the air. RPGs loomed, ready. In the middle of it all, the stranded RIB joined the fight. 5 sailors, exposed in a drifting rubber boat, raised their rifles and fired. Three directions of gunfire converged into one violent intersection. Then, a single tracer round found its mark. A fuel drum. The impact was instantaneous. Flame erupted, fed by diesel vapor igniting under pressure. Fire spread in a heartbeat, racing across the shattered deck. Then, it reached the gasoline. The explosion wasn't cinematic. It was sudden, violent, absolute. The skiff became a towering column of fire and smoke, visible for miles. From above, the Seahawk's thermal display flared white. Everything changed. The two attack boats slowed, then stopped. In the silence that followed, reality set in. Their mothership was gone. No fuel, no supplies, no way home. They were alone, surrounded, outgunned, and outmatched. One by one, weapons dropped. Hands rose. 12 pirates, who had set out that morning expecting fortune, now sat bound on the deck of a cruiser, surrounded by more firepower than most nations could muster. And the truth lingered in the aftermath. For all the advanced systems, the missiles, the sensors, the billions spent on technological superiority, none of it had mattered when the distance collapsed. In the end, it came down to human decisions, mechanical failure, and raw firepower at point-blank range. A broken engine had turned the most powerful navy on Earth into something far simpler. A gunfight in the middle of the ocean, and 5 men in a rubber boat who refused to go down without one.